Hey, what's up, guys, and welcome to another episode of Gamescript. This is Sunday Night Football, and we have the Dallas Cowboys versus the Philadelphia Eagles. They're playing in Dallas with a 51.5-point total, and Dallas are 3.5-point favorites. But should they be? That's going to be the question of the day, and we'll get into that right after this. Hey, what's up, guys? Simon Edwards at Pumacom here with Heat Seeker Sports, and you're watching Gamescript. Tonight's game is Sunday Night Football between the Philadelphia Eagles and the Dallas Cowboys. 51.5-point total. They're playing in Dallas, and Dallas are the favorites by 3.5 points. So it's going to be a really interesting game tonight. There are some preconceived notions about the Dallas side that they are this dominant team. They have been dominant the last few weeks of the season, but the thing with the Dallas Cowboys is they've only beaten weak opponents. If you look at the games that they've played throughout the season, before we do that, hit the like button. We're looking for 15 likes to put out a shorter video with my favorite picks later on in the day, sometime before lock. And subscribe to the page because you're going to want to get the alert when that video hits. And if you subscribe to the page, I'm looking for 300 subscribers. I'm at about 212 last time I looked. So still need to get about 90 more before the end of the season, and I'll hit my goal of getting 300. So I appreciate the help there. So we're looking at this game, and Dallas has been on fire as an offense, one of the most hyped teams in the league right now. And there's a good reason for that. They've been doing really well. But look at the teams that they've beaten throughout the season. They beat the Giants in week 1, beat the Jets in week 2. They lost to the Cardinals in week 3. They beat the Patriots. They lost to the 49ers in week 5. Week 6, they beat the Chargers by 3 points. Week 8, they beat the Rams. Week 9, they lost to the Eagles. Week 10, they beat the Giants. Week 11, they beat the Panthers. And week 12, they beat the Commanders. So they have not beaten a good team all year. And if you look at the Philly side, Philly lost last week to the 49ers. The week before that, they beat the Bills. The week before that, they beat the Chiefs. They beat the Cowboys in the week before that. So that's 3 huge wins in a row before losing to the 49ers. They beat the Commanders. They beat the Dolphins, another really good team. They lost to the Jets, and then they beat the Rams. They beat the Commanders again. They beat the Bucks. They beat the Vikings, and they beat the Patriots. So there's a lot tougher teams that Philadelphia has beaten that Dallas has lost to. So Philadelphia, I think, if you look at their record and the teams that they've played this year, Philadelphia is the better team, but they are playing in Dallas. This is a matchup that has put up a ton of points throughout the history of these teams, especially the recent history. If we look at recent history, we can see that earlier this year, the score was 28-23 Philadelphia. Last year, the 2 games that they played, Dallas beat Philadelphia 34-40. They lost to Philadelphia 26-17 the other game last year. Then they beat Philadelphia twice in 2021. They won 51-26 and 41-21. Ton of points scored in these games. And then the 2020 season, they won 37-17 and they lost 23-9. But the last 3 years, if we're looking at 21 through 23, we're seeing some monster totals in these games. And that's when Dak Prescott has been versus Jalen Hurts. Now, there there has been, games when those quarterbacks were injured. So they haven't played each other in all those games, but you get the idea. These teams have scored a ton of points when they faced off against each other. So it makes a lot of sense that the total is 51.5 points tonight. Like in recent history, that's all that we've seen is these monster totals. So that's going to be an interesting situation with trying to build lineups tonight when we're trying to look at this total and try to pinpoint the plays that are going to score the most points. It's not one of those bills that you necessarily want to try to go different with a low scoring game, but that's a way to get different. But it's going to be maybe a situation where we look at a position that isn't going to be highlighted in ownership when we're trying to get a little bit different today. So let's take a look at this game. We'll take a look at the player pool. CeeDee Lamb has been amazing against Philly. He's gone off, like he's going off this entire season. He had 36 points last week against Seattle, but in general, he's just gone off throughout the season. He had 32 points the last time these teams met in week 9, and a week after that, he had 43 points against New York. But versus Philly, the last few games that they've played, CeeDee Lamb's put up 16 targets, 11 receptions, 191 yards, and 0 touchdowns. That was this year, I believe. Yeah, that was the game that they played this year. Last year, in their second game against each other, 11 targets, 10 receptions, 120 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So another monster game by CeeDee Lamb. And then the other game last year, 10 targets, 5 receptions, and 68 yards. So that was the worst game that he's had against them. I have a hard time getting away from CeeDee Lamb tonight. I can get away from him in the captain, but it's a hard guy to leave out of my lineups. We're looking at Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts in the last game against Dallas put up 26 DraftKings points, and historically he's been pretty good against the Cowboys. He had 207 yards with 2 touchdowns plus 36 yards and a touchdown in that last game. He had 155 passing yards for 2 touchdowns and 27 rushing yards in the prior game that they played. In the prior game that Hurts played, it was 326 passing yards with 2 touchdowns and then 35 yards rushing. And then before that, 342 yards passing with 1 touchdown and 69 yards rushing. So he's had a lot of success against Dallas. Makes it hard to get away from Hurts too. Dak Prescott, he has also been doing well against Philadelphia. Last game that they played, he had 31 DraftKings points. Prior to that, he had 347 yards and 3 touchdowns, adding 41 rushing yards in a game last year. Prior to that, 295 passing yards with 5 touchdowns. And then in a game in 2018, because Dak has missed a few of these games with injuries, in 2018, he had 455 passing yards with 3 touchdowns in the game in 2018. So this is what we're dealing with. All these high-priced guys have had monster games against each other in these matchups. I don't know if you hear my kid. He's losing his mind downstairs. A.J. Brown has, he has not done as well in this matchup. A.J. Brown has had 9 targets for 7 receptions, 66 yards, and a touchdown. Last game against each other. My fucking kid is going nuts. Game before that, 8 targets, 6 receptions, 103 yards. And the game before that, 8 targets, 5 receptions, 67 yards, and a touchdown. So he has been up and down. He's a high-priced guy, probably the weakest high-priced guy on this slate. So, take that for what it's worth. Devontae Smith he's been probably the weakest guy out of this bunch. He had 3 targets, 3 receptions, 51 yards, and a touchdown in the last game. 12 targets, 8 receptions, 113 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Last year, 5 targets, 5 receptions, 44 yards, and a touchdown prior to that. So maybe he's not too bad. Those are the last couple years against Dallas. and then 4 targets, 3 receptions, 41 yards before that. So that is what we're looking at for Devontae Smith. Pollard has not done so well in this matchup, but we're not really looking at targeting Pollard necessarily in this matchup unless we want to get different. Philadelphia is only giving up 17 DraftKings points a game to the running back position. The weak spots against Philadelphia are the passing game, where they're giving up 23 DraftKings points a game to the quarterback position. And they gave up, 18 DraftKings points a game to the wideouts, and they're giving up 28.4 DraftKings points a game to the slot receivers. So that's where CeeDee Lamb roams. Now, the wideouts are going to be an interesting situation for Dallas tonight because that has been the spot where Philadelphia has been the weakest this year. I saw a thing by Rich Rebar. I was reading his article today, and they are allowing a league high 16.3 receptions per game to opposing wide receivers for 196.9 yards per game. That's 31st in the league. And they're allowing a 6.7 touchdown rate to wideouts, which is also 31st in the league. So that might be where we get different tonight. And I'll just start building this lineup right now because Cooks is the guy that I like in that spot. Cooks has had some great games lately. He only had 1.7 DraftKings points the last time that these teams faced off against each other. But then he followed that up with 35 DraftKings points against New York. And then last couple weeks, he's been pretty good. He had 17 DraftKings points against Seattle and 17 DraftKings points against Washington. So I kind of like Cooks tonight as a cheaper option as a captain. We have another interesting spot with Dallas Goedert because Goedert is back in tonight, and when Goedert plays, that reduces the role of Devontae Smith, or at least reduces the opportunity that he gets. So Dallas Goedert is a guy that I like tonight as a pivot from Devontae Smith. Devontae Smith has been hot recently. 24 DraftKings points, almost 25 DraftKings points last week, 27 the week before that. Then he had 16 and 14, just a string of good games. But with Goedert back in, Goedert is, tight end position has done well versus Dallas when they've been targeted. Another little fact by Rich Rebar. Check out his article on Sharp Football Analysis. He always does good nuggets in those articles. But Goedert, because of that, is interesting tonight. Goedert was on a roll before he got hurt in the last game that these guys faced off against each other. Goedert broke his arm in that game, and before that, he was heading towards a decent game. So I like Goedert as well. I think I want to put in Lamb. I want to put in Prescott. Hurts, I'd like to get in, but we got to look at these dumpster diving situation and see, like what we like here. I don't see a ton that I like. Julio Jones might be an option if we want to get different. I don't really see too much else that I like in these in this range here. Schoonmaker is interesting because he's had opportunities this season and he's scored some touchdowns this season already, but he's got a tough matchup against Philly, who doesn't give a lot to the tight end position. But if we're looking at the matchup specifically, they're giving up 11 DraftKings points a game to the tight end position versus Dallas, which is giving up 12 DraftKings points a game to the tight end position. So we got that matchup there. If we wanted to take Hurts out, because Hurts is probably the high-priced guy that will probably be the most owned, but have the most opportunity to disappoint tonight, just based on their previous matchups. He's relied heavily on those rushing touchdowns, And if he doesn't get a rushing touchdown tonight, then it's not going to be a good scene for Hurts. I think I prefer AJ Brown in there. If I put AJ Brown in there, that leaves me with 2K left. That leaves me with guys like Turpin and Scott in there as well. Zacchaeus and Jones. This feels like one of those nights where we're probably going to have to go and grab one of these low cost guys, and it's really hard to figure out which one of those that we like unless we put in, maybe we go captain Goddard tonight. Let's say that Goddard comes back, he gets a lot of work in this matchup that he was on a roll with the last game that they played. That gives us 9,900 to work with. Let's say we get Cooks back in there, and we got 2,900 to work with at that point. That gives us Tolbert as an option and Watkins and guys like that. I don't necessarily like putting Tolbert in there with Lamb or with Cooks. So let's put Tolbert in there instead of Cooks. That leaves us with 7,100. Now Tolbert, being another one of those wideouts, would have just as much opportunity, or like at least. I won't say opportunity, but he has just as much chance to beat that Eagles secondary as Cooks does. And let's say that Cooks is getting covered well, that would open the door for Tolbert to have a decent game. And then we got options like Ferguson here. We got Aubrey as an option. We got Elliott. Just all sorts of options. Both the defenses. It opens things up a lot when you use Tolbert instead. You could throw in Gallup as an option too. And, that I don't like that as much. Tolbert's been getting more opportunity than Gallup lately. So I kind of like Tolbert in that spot. That's what you can do with the Dallas Goedert captain. So it kind of shows what you can do when you go away from the the common captain that we're going to see in like Lamb and Prescott and Hurts and Brown. If we wanted to swap out Prescott for Hurts, let's say we think that Hurts is going to outscore him, that leaves us with 6,700. That leaves us in these builds where we can put in one of the kickers, the defenses and stuff like that. So that leaves us in a good spot too. This is what we can do with Goddard in the captain. If we wanted to take Goddard out and put Cooks back in there with Hurts in there, 4,300 is what it leaves us with. Defenses, Michael Gallup and stuff like that. So it's gonna be a tough one to get different on tonight. Dallas are the favorites. I tend to lean Philadelphia. Just based on like Dallas has not been able to beat any good teams, and Philadelphia has beat all the good teams except for San Francisco, and they lost to them last week, so it's a get right spot for them. If we wanted to say play a low scoring game in this, and let's say that like these defenses are showing up, I still like both the quarterbacks in that scenario, and maybe we put. I really don't like the running backs matchups, but that being said, like a lot of times where the matchup seems obvious or the matchup seems obvious fade, that's where they end up going off. So why don't we try putting in Pollard in the captain, because Eagles have been susceptible to running backs recently. So if we go with Pollard in the captain, let's say that the defenses are doing well. So we got the Cowboys defense. Let's say, maybe the Eagles defense are able to slow down Dak as well. Let's get Lamb in there, and let's try to get Dak. That leaves us with 8,600. That leaves us in position to put in a guy like Cooks to get that deep threat. to put in Ferguson or to put in Devontae Smith. We could put in Goddard in that situation too. What if we got rid of the Eagles and we put in Smith? It doesn't leave us with too much. But if we put in Goddard in that situation, let's say that they're holding A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, so they're having to turn to Goddard. Leaves us with 6,800. We can put in Ferguson in that situation too. Give Dak another receiver, but I really want to get the wideout in there. So let's get rid of Pollard. Let's put Cooks in there. So we got Dak to Cooks, and he's got Lamb. We got the defense holding back the Eagles a bit. We got Goddard in there. Leaves us with 8,300. There we can put in Pollard as a flex guy instead of a captain, but that's going to give us a 5-1 build. I don't like the 5-1 builds tonight. So maybe we take out Lamb. Maybe we put in Hurts instead. Hurts outscores Lamb in this build. And then we got options like Smith and Pollard and Swift and guys like that. So that's a way that you can go when you kind of swap it out a little bit and not try to jam in all the studs. Like this type of lineup, you're not having to go dumpster diving. You have a realistic captain. You have a realistic play in the Cowboys. We know that defense has been good for most of the year. And then we got Prescott, Hurts, and Goddard. All good plays tonight. And it leaves us with options of putting in guys like Devontae Smith, Tony Pollard, like Swift, guys like that. And I don't think that there's necessarily going to be a big ownership. Let me check and see if I have any ownership projections right now that I can look at to kind of get an idea of what Cooks is going to be tonight. So let's see. Captain ownership. Looking at CeeDee Lamb is going to be the highest owned, and then it's Jalen Hurts. But if you scroll down, Dak is going to be under-owned given the matchup. I don't mind Dak as a captain option. Goddard is going to be low owned as you would imagine. Cooks is going to be under 4% owned in this matchup. So I really like Cooks as a captain option tonight. I think it's a good matchup, and I think it's a good spot for him. And, this is the type of build that you can do with Cooks. I gave another one earlier. I'll give you what the chalk build is. Before I do that, hit that like button. Give me to 15. I'll put out my favorite likes closer to lock, and subscribe to the page because, been on fire with some of these picks lately. I had the backup running back for Chase Brown he's just crushing against the whoever they're playing. The Cincinnati Bengals backup running back is on fire today, and I had him in my show as a heavy recommendation last night. So hopefully, if you watched the show last night, you got in on Chase Brown, but he is up to about 17 DraftKings points, and he was basically bare minimum as a running back option on a slate where we needed value. So loving seeing that so far. And had some other good calls in there too. Watching the games play out now, but not really sure where they're going to end up. But some good calls in there. And if you were subscribed to the YouTube page or you've been watching the content, hopefully you are making money off that slate. But make sure you subscribe so you can at least get the alerts when I put up these shorter videos closer to lock. We got a 2-game slate tomorrow on top of that. And yeah, it's just going to be a lot of goodness coming up. So looking at Cooks in the captain here, show you what the chalky build is. Chalky build has Tony Pollard. They went in that Tony Pollard direction. I'm not a huge fan of that. They also had Hendershot and Aubrey and Dak, and let's see, they got Dak in there. They got Hurts. They got Aubrey, and they got Hendershot. Hendershot I don't mind either. He's at 200, and he's had a couple targets this season. He's not. I take that back. I'm not on Hendershot. I don't like that play. 11-2, that's what it leaves us with, though. You got Ceedee Lamb as an option, A.J. Brown, whichever direction you want to go there. Let's see if there's any other $200 guys that I'd play over Hendershot. I don't really see this Brooks guy. Jalen Brooks had one target last week. He had 4 targets in week 10 versus the Giants. That was probably garbage time. Yeah, just not a ton to work with. You got Deuce Vaughn. He might be inactive, though. He's been inactive a lot. Yeah, week 10 is the last game that he played. You got Jones, Julio Jones. We got Quez Watkins is back, though, so he didn't get any targets last week against San Francisco. Prior to that, he got 3 targets and 2 targets. So Jones is he's a cheap option. We never know when he can pop off. Schoonmaker is Jones is probably about as low as I'd go because I don't really see anybody that I like. So maybe if other content leads you in a direction that is better than that, then just do your own research and go with something that you might hear from another show. But I don't like anybody under that 1,200, like 1,000 range. Really, Zacchaeus is probably the lowest I like, apart from maybe Jones. I don't like him, but he just really hasn't gotten any action in this offense. Just a few targets at best, and then we got Quez Watkins is back. So, like Jones isn't really doing anything for me, but I think the key points to remember for the game tonight are going to be the wideouts on Dallas. Make sure to try to get in Cooks or Gallup or Tolbert in your lineups. One of those guys. I wouldn't put 2, but one of those guys. If you fade Ceedee, that is where I would go with 2 of those guys, because that means that Philly's focusing on and having success against Ceedee Lamb, which are going to open up those other guys out wide. So that is where I would use them, and maybe I'd use Cooks and Tolbert. Not really a Gallup fan. He hasn't delivered this year yet. That is one key point. Another key point is the success that tight ends are having against Dallas when they're being targeted. And that correlates also with the lack of success that Devontae Smith has had when Goddard is in the game. A lot of those points, like running games, are going to struggle if you look at the matchups tonight. Maybe DeAndre Swift has a better matchup than Tony Pollard tonight. You could make a case there, but I think, in general, maybe instead of Pollard, if you wanted to go that route, because Swift hasn't done really anything recently, which is a good thing for Showdown. If we look at what he's done recently, 4 points last week, 9 points a week before that. He pops off every once in a while for a decent game. So let's say that this is a game where he is going to pop off. Last time they played Dallas, I think they were missing one of their key run blockers, and he did not do very well, but that run blocker has been back the last few weeks. It hasn't really helped DeAndre too much, but he did have 20 points in the first game that dude was back. I believe that was against Kansas City. So let's put in Swift as a captain and see what that can do if we swap him out in this build. And let's get rid of Pendershot. That leaves us with 6,100. Like if we wanted to put in, we got Hurts and Prescott. If we want to put in Lamb, take out Aubrey, leaves us with 3K per guy. If we wanted to go Tolbert in this build, that leaves us 3,300. And then, we could get like a Watkins in or something like that. If we wanted to, with a build like this, you can basically just swap out Prescott for, actually, let me take that back. Let's put in Brown instead of, because if we got Swift in there, that means that he's poaching some of those rushing touchdowns from Hurts and Hurts doesn't put up the type of points without the rushing touchdowns that he might show up in a lineup in a high-powered game like this. So we got Brown in there along with Swift. On the Dallas side, it is Prescott throwing to Tolbert and Lamb and having success there. And then let's put in 4,100. I mean, we could put in the Cowboys D at that point. Michael Gallup, if you wanted to get a second guy in there. I preferred, I think, the Cowboys D in that situation. We could swap it out, a little bit further. Let's take out Tolbert. Let's put back in the captain with Cooks. Let's put him back in the captain. Let's put Swift in this one. Only leaves us with $100, so it's going to be a tough one tonight. But I do like Cooks as a captain option. I like all of like the passing game of Dallas. For the Eagles side, I think that is where you can get a little bit different if you decide to go A.J. Brown over Jalen Hurts. Like Hurts will be like a must for a lot of people. And I think that the passing game on the Dallas side has the better matchup. But that doesn't mean that I think that Dallas is going to beat the Eagles. I think that, it's going to be a high-scoring game, at least to the total of 51 points. But maybe not much higher than that. And if it's not much higher than that, I think people are going to be shooting for the moon on this one. So just keep that in mind. Like when you're building, maybe try to build some lower scoring outputs. But I do like Cooks. I do like the wideouts, and I like the passing game of Dallas. And I like some of the passing elements of the Philly side. Like I like Brown and I like Goddard tonight. And I'm going to do some thinking about Swift, and I'm going to do some thinking about maybe Ferguson or something like that, because he's another. He's kind of expensive, but he's on the cheaper end of these high powered guys. And Ferguson has had some success against Philly in the past. 10 targets, 7 receptions, 91 yards, and a touchdown in that last game. And then last year he had a game against Philly where he had 6 targets, 4 receptions, 40 yards, and a touchdown. So that's it for this week's show. Hopefully I'll put out a video later on today. Make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. We got plenty of content and best ball playoff content coming up. So make sure to subscribe.